In this video, we are going to multiply using the distributive property. Now, we've used the distributive property in the beginning of the school year. Like I gave you problems before, like number 1. So let's review what that was like before. So if you remember, distributive property is taking a number times an entire expression. So if I wanted to multiply 3 times the expression 2x minus 5, I want to take 3 and multiply it by the 2x and to the minus 5. So 3 times 2x is 6x, because 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times minus 5 is a minus 15. Okay, so the only thing that's going to change about the examples we do today is I'm going to add a variable out front of the term that's being distributed. So what we need to do is use that property of exponent rule that we used a couple of weeks ago that says if I have two variables, and I multiply them, then with their exponents, I am going to add them. All right, so this is the rule that we are going to use today, okay? So if I multiply 3x times 2x minus 5, I'm going to multiply 3x times 2x, which is going to give me 3 times 2, which is 6, x times x. Remember, that's really an x to the first and an x to the first, so 1 plus 1 is 2. 3x times minus 5, well, 3 times minus 5 is negative 15. X times, there is no variable here, so my x just comes with it. So my final answer becomes 6x to the second minus 15x. All right, if I look at example 3, this time I'm distributing a 4x to the third, and now you notice I have 3 terms inside my parentheses. So I'm going to start by multiplying 4x to the third times 2x to the fourth. So 4 times 2 is 8. X to the third times x to the fourth, I'm going to add 3 plus 4 and get x to the 7th. Then I want to distribute 4x to the third times negative 5x to the second. 4 times negative 5 is a negative 20. X to the third times x to the second, I'm going to add 3 plus 2 and get x to the 5th. And finally, 4 times 3. 4 times 3 is 12, a positive 12. X to the third times, there are no variables here, so it will stay in x to the third. So my final answer became 8x to the 7th minus 20x to the 5th plus 12x to the third. Okay, let's look at 2 more examples before you practice distributing. Okay, in number 4, I'm going to take negative 7x to the third times this expression. So again, I've got 3 terms in my parentheses, and you notice this time I have a negative 7 in the front. So just be careful when you're multiplying and changing signs. Negative 7 times 2 is going to become a negative 14. X to the third times x to the fourth. Well, 3 plus 4 is 7. Okay, and then I'm going to take negative 7x to the third times a negative 3x to the second. So you just want to be careful here. Negative 7 times negative 3 is a positive 21. X to the third times x to the second, I'm going to add 3 plus 2 and get an x to the 5th. And then I'm going to multiply negative 7x to the third times x. Well, a couple of things about this last term x. The coefficient out front is really 1. So if I do negative 7 times 1, I'm going to get a negative 7. The exponent of this x is also 1. So if I multiply x to the third times x to the first, you have to remember that you are adding 3 plus 1, which is going to give you x to the 4th. So that's a common mistake people make right here, is sometimes they keep it as an x to the third, when really x to the third times x to the first gives you an x to the 4th. All right, and my last example, okay, kind of talking about what I just talked about up here, is if you just have an x, you have to be careful about a couple of things. In our case, we have a negative x out front. So I want to remember that that means I have a negative 1 coefficient. And I'm also going to write that 1 in because this is an x to the first. So when I distribute, I got to make sure I'm adding 1 to those exponents. Well, negative 1 times 9 is a negative 9. X to the first times x to the second, well, I'm going to add 1 plus 2 and get an x to the third. If I distribute, to my second term, that's just a negative 8x. I'm going to put a 1 in there so I don't forget. Negative 1 times negative 8 is a positive 8. X to the first times x to the first, I'm going to add 1 plus 1 and get x to the second. And finally, I'm going to distribute a negative 1x to the first times a negative 3. Negative 1 times negative 3 is a positive 3. X to the first, there are no variables here, so it doesn't change. So it stays as an x to the first. All right, so a couple of things about distributing. Just be careful when you distribute through with negative numbers and you change their signs when you multiply. And don't forget that you are adding, you're using that rule, we are adding the exponents of the variables when you multiply.